In the summer of 1993, Glacier National Park in Montana was experiencing one of its busiest tourist seasons in years. The pristine wilderness, with its towering peaks and crystal-clear lakes, drew thousands of visitors seeking adventure and natural beauty. Among them were Sarah Michelle Thompson, 24, and Daniel Ray Morrison, 26, a young couple from Denver, Colorado, who had been married just 6 weeks earlier. Sarah worked as an elementary school teacher, beloved by her students for her patient nature and infectious laugh. She had grown up hiking the Colorado Rockies with her father, developing a deep love for the outdoors that would define much of her adult life. Daniel was a software engineer for a growing tech company, methodical and careful by nature, but with an adventurous spirit that perfectly complemented Sarah's enthusiasm for exploration. The couple had planned their Montana trip as both a delayed honeymoon and an anniversary celebration of their first meeting, which had occurred 3 years earlier during a camping trip in Rocky Mountain National Park. They had saved for months to afford the 2-week adventure, planning to explore multiple trails throughout Glacier National Park before heading south to Yellowstone. Their daily routine during the first week of their trip followed a predictable pattern. They would wake early in their small tent at the Apgar campground, sharing instant coffee and granola bars while watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. Sarah would meticulously plan their hiking route using topographical maps, while Daniel checked and rechecked their gear, ensuring they had adequate water, first aid supplies, and emergency equipment. Friends and family back home described them as the perfect hiking partners. Sarah's spontaneous nature balanced Daniel's cautious planning, while his attention to detail provided the safety net that allowed Sarah to embrace new challenges. They communicated constantly during hikes, pointing out wildlife, sharing water and snacks, and taking turns leading when the trail became difficult. Their relationship with technology was typical for the early 1990s. They carried no cell phones, GPS devices, or emergency beacons. Communication with the outside world required payphones at visitor centers or ranger stations. They had promised Sarah's parents they would call every few days to check in, a commitment they had faithfully maintained throughout their journey. Daniel's methodical nature extended to their travel documentation. He kept a detailed journal of their daily activities, recording hiking distances, weather conditions, and notable wildlife sightings. Sarah contributed her own observations about plant life and geological features, creating a comprehensive record of their Montana adventure that would later prove invaluable to investigators. The couple's financial situation was typical of young professionals in the early 90s. They had saved diligently for their trip, cutting back on dining out and entertainment for months to afford the extended vacation. Their gear was a mixture of wedding gifts and carefully chosen purchases from outdoor equipment stores in Denver, where they had consulted extensively with experienced staff about the specific challenges of hiking in Glacier National Park. Sarah's teaching salary and Daniel's engineering income provided them with a comfortable middle-class lifestyle, but they were conscious of their budget and planned their activities accordingly. They had purchased detailed topographical maps of the park and spent hours studying trail guides and safety recommendations provided by the National Park Service. If you enjoy real mysteries like this one, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any cases. On the morning of July 15, 1993, Sarah and Daniel appeared to be in excellent spirits as they prepared for what would become their final documented hike. Fellow campers at Apgar remembered seeing them organizing their backpacks with unusual care, spreading equipment across their picnic table, and discussing something intently over their trail map. The couple had chosen the Avalanche Lake Trail for that day, a moderate 4.5-mile round-trip hike that was popular among visitors, but not particularly challenging for experienced hikers like themselves. The trail followed Avalanche Creek through a dense forest of cedar and hemlock trees, before opening into a spectacular glacial cirque surrounded by towering peaks and cascading waterfalls. Park records show they registered at the Trail of the Cedars trailhead at 8:47 in the morning, signing their names in the logbook with Daniel's characteristic precise handwriting. The volunteer at the information station remembered them specifically because Sarah had asked detailed questions about wildlife activity in the area, particularly regarding black bears and mountain goats. They seemed like every other young couple we see here, the volunteer Margaret Hendricks would later tell investigators. Happy, excited, well-prepared. The woman was asking smart questions about the trail conditions and weather forecast. Nothing seemed unusual or concerning. 3 other hikers encountered Sarah and Daniel during the first portion of their journey. A retired couple from Minnesota passed them approximately 1 mile from the trailhead, noting that they were moving at a steady pace and appeared to be enjoying their conversation. The couple remembered Sarah pointing excitedly at something in the forest canopy, possibly birds or wildlife. The last confirmed sighting occurred around 10:30 in the morning, when a group of college students from Washington State overtook Sarah and Daniel near the halfway point of the trail. The students were moving quickly, hoping to reach the lake early before afternoon crowds arrived. They exchanged brief pleasantries about the beautiful weather and trail conditions. "We were in a hurry, so we didn't stop to chat much," one of the students, Jennifer Walsh, recalled years later. "But they seemed fine, normal. The guy was taking pictures with one of those old film cameras, and the woman was looking at some kind of field guide, maybe for wildflowers or birds." After that encounter, Sarah and Daniel Thompson Morrison effectively vanished from the historical record. When the couple failed to return to their campsite by early evening, other campers initially assumed they had decided to extend their hike or had encountered interesting wildlife that delayed their return. It was not uncommon for experienced hikers to spend longer than anticipated on trails, especially during the long summer days when darkness didn't arrive until after 9 o'clock. However, as night fell and there was still no sign of the couple, concern began to grow among their camping neighbors. Sarah's meticulously organized nature meant she rarely deviated from stated plans without good reason. The couple's tent remained exactly as they had left it that morning, with their evening meal ingredients laid out in preparation for dinner. By 10 o'clock that night, worried campers contacted the campground host, who in turn notified park rangers. The campground host, Robert Kowalski, a retired Forest Service employee who had worked at Glacier for 15 years, immediately recognized the seriousness of the situation. His experience had taught him that responsible hikers like Sarah and Daniel rarely deviated from their stated plans without compelling reasons. Kowalski's initial assessment of their campsite revealed troubling details that heightened his concern. The couple's evening meal ingredients remained exactly as they had been arranged that morning, suggesting they had expected to return for dinner. More significantly, Sarah's sleeping bag was still laid out with her journal and pen beside it, indicating she had planned to write about their day's adventure as was her established routine. The park's emergency response protocol in 1993 relied heavily on radio communication between ranger stations and search teams. Unlike today's sophisticated GPS tracking and satellite communication systems, coordination depended on established check-in times and predetermined search grids that could take hours to organize and deploy. The initial search efforts focused on the assumption that Sarah and Daniel had suffered some kind of hiking accident. Search teams methodically covered the Avalanche Lake Trail, examining areas where hikers might slip, fall, or become disoriented. Rangers checked the lake itself, though its clear waters and relatively shallow depth made it unlikely that drowning victims could remain hidden. What searchers found instead was deeply puzzling. At approximately the 3-mile mark of the trail, just before the final approach to the lake, investigators discovered what appeared to be a hastily abandoned campsite in a small clearing roughly 50 yards off the main trail. The site contained Sarah's distinctive red backpack, partially unpacked, with some of its contents scattered on the ground. Among the scattered items were Sarah's trail map, water bottles, energy bars, and her camera with its film still inside. Notably absent were Daniel's larger hiking pack, their first aid kit, and any camping gear that would suggest they had planned to spend the night away from their registered campsite. The discovery raised immediate questions. Why had the couple left the established trail? What had prompted them to stop in this particular location? And most mysteriously, why had Sarah's pack been abandoned while Daniel's remained missing? Park rangers expanded their search radius, bringing in additional personnel and beginning aerial reconnaissance of the surrounding wilderness. The rugged terrain around Avalanche Lake included steep cliffs, dense forest, and numerous smaller trails and animal paths that could easily disorient hikers unfamiliar with the area. As days passed without any additional discoveries, theories began to emerge among investigators and the growing volunteer search community. Some suggested the couple had encountered wildlife, possibly a black bear or mountain lion, and had fled their campsite in panic. Others theorized they had suffered injuries that prevented them from returning to safety, perhaps falling into one of the area's deep crevasses or becoming trapped in remote terrain. The couple's families arrived from Colorado within 48 hours of the disappearance, bringing additional resources and desperate energy to the search effort. Sarah's father, an experienced mountaineer, joined search teams despite his emotional state, providing valuable insights into his daughter's hiking capabilities and decision-making patterns. Sarah would never abandon her pack unless something terrible happened, he told investigators. She was obsessive about being prepared. That pack contained everything she considered essential for safety. Daniel's parents, less familiar with wilderness activities, focused on coordinating with park officials and managing communication with media outlets that had begun covering the story. The case quickly gained regional attention, particularly in Colorado, where both families had strong community connections. After 2 weeks of intensive searching involving over 100 volunteers, multiple helicopter flyovers, and specialized search and rescue teams, park officials made the difficult decision to scale back active search operations. The vast wilderness of Glacier National Park contained thousands of potential locations where evidence might remain hidden, and searchers had covered all accessible areas within reasonable hiking distance of the couple's last known location. The investigation entered a new phase, focusing on evidence analysis and witness interviews. Park rangers meticulously cataloged every item found at the abandoned campsite, looking for clues about what might have prompted the couple to leave the main trail. The film from Sarah's camera was developed, revealing pictures taken during their previous hikes, but nothing from the day of their disappearance. Investigators interviewed dozens of other park visitors who had been in the Avalanche Lake area during the relevant time period. While several people remembered seeing a young couple matching Sarah and Daniel's description, no one reported witnessing any unusual incidents or concerning behavior. The case attracted attention from experienced search and rescue experts across the region, many of whom volunteered their time and expertise to help solve the mystery. The consensus among these professionals was that the evidence suggested some kind of sudden emergency that had forced the couple to abandon their planned route. As autumn arrived and search conditions became more difficult, the Thompson and Morrison families faced the heartbreaking reality that their children might never be found. Both families established reward funds for information leading to the discovery of Sarah and Daniel, and continued to visit Glacier National Park regularly, often joining unofficial search efforts organized by volunteers. The case remained active in park records, but with no new evidence or credible leads, investigative attention gradually shifted to other priorities. Annual memorial services held by the families kept the story alive in local media, but public attention inevitably faded as years passed without resolution. In 2001, nearly 8 years after the disappearance, a brief surge of renewed interest occurred when hikers discovered human remains in a remote area of the park, approximately 15 miles from Avalanche Lake. However, forensic analysis determined the remains belonged to a solo hiker who had disappeared in the 1970s, providing closure for one family, but deepening the mystery surrounding Sarah and Daniel's fate. Advanced search technologies that became available in the early 2000s, including GPS mapping and improved aerial surveillance equipment, were applied to the case several times over the following decade. These efforts, while more sophisticated than the original search, failed to uncover any additional evidence or clues. The families never stopped believing that answers existed somewhere in the vast wilderness of Glacier National Park. They maintained contact with park rangers, regularly submitted new search requests, and organized annual volunteer efforts that combined memorial activities with continued exploration of areas that had not been thoroughly examined during the original investigation. In 2012, 19 years after Sarah and Daniel's disappearance, a discovery would finally provide a concrete connection to the missing couple, though it would raise as many questions as it answered. Marcus Chen, an experienced hiker and amateur photographer from Seattle, was exploring a remote section of forest approximately 2 miles northeast of Avalanche Lake when he noticed something unusual about an old-growth cedar tree. The massive tree, probably over 200 years old, had a distinctive hollow section in its trunk about 7 feet from the ground. What caught Chen's attention was a glint of metal visible inside the hollow. Using a small flashlight, he peered into the cavity and was shocked to discover what appeared to be a wedding ring nestled among the natural debris that had accumulated inside the tree trunk over many years. Chen, aware of the missing couple case through his involvement in hiking communities, immediately contacted park rangers rather than disturbing the potential evidence. Within hours, investigators had carefully extracted not just 1 but 2 rings from the hollow tree, a women's wedding band with a distinctive engraved pattern and a men's ring that appeared to match. The rings were quickly identified through photographs and family records as belonging to Sarah and Daniel Thompson Morrison. The discovery sent shockwaves through the families, who had maintained hope for nearly 2 decades that their children might still be alive somewhere. But the discovery location raised profound new questions about what had happened during those final hours in July 1993. The tree was located in an area that had not been part of the couple's planned hiking route, and its position relative to where Sarah's backpack had been found suggested they had traveled much farther from the main trail than anyone had previously imagined. More puzzling was the condition and placement of the rings. They showed signs of weathering consistent with nearly 20 years of exposure to mountain conditions, but their location inside the tree hollow suggested they had been deliberately placed there rather than lost accidentally. Park forensics experts, working with FBI specialists experienced in wilderness investigations, conducted a thorough examination of the discovery site. The tree hollow contained various natural debris accumulated over many years, but careful analysis revealed additional items that appeared connected to the missing couple. Buried beneath layers of decomposed leaves and organic matter, investigators found fragments of fabric that appeared consistent with clothing descriptions provided by the families. More significantly, they discovered a small piece of laminated paper that contained part of a phone number written in handwriting that Sarah's family confirmed matched her distinctive style. The area around the tree was subjected to the most intensive forensic examination possible, given the challenging terrain and the passage of time. Ground-penetrating radar was used to search for any buried evidence, and metal detectors were employed to look for additional personal items. These efforts yielded several additional discoveries. Approximately 30 yards from the tree, searchers found corroded remnants of what appeared to be camping equipment, including metal buckles and zippers that could have come from Daniel's missing backpack. The items were scattered across a small area, suggesting they had been exposed to weather and possibly wildlife activity for an extended period. More disturbing was the discovery of bone fragments that forensic experts determined were consistent with human remains. However, the fragments were severely weathered and incomplete, making definitive identification impossible with the scientific techniques available at that time. The discovery site became the focus of the most comprehensive investigation in the case's history. Teams of specialists spent weeks methodically searching the area, mapping every piece of potential evidence and carefully documenting the location where each item was found. What emerged was a complex picture that suggested Sarah and Daniel had traveled much farther from their intended route than anyone had previously believed possible. The evidence indicated they had spent at least some time in the area where the rings were discovered, but the circumstances that brought them there remained mysterious. Forensic analysis of the rings provided additional insights. Microscopic examination revealed that both rings had been removed from their wearers rather than lost in an accident. There were no signs of the rings being forcibly removed, suggesting the couple had taken them off deliberately. Inside Sarah's ring, investigators discovered traces of organic material that forensic botanists identified as coming from plants native to the specific area where the tree was located. This finding supported the theory that the couple had spent significant time in that location before the rings were placed in the tree hollow. The investigation team developed several theories about what might have motivated Sarah and Daniel to place their wedding rings inside the tree. Some experts suggested it could have been a romantic gesture, perhaps intended as a way to leave a permanent mark of their love in the beautiful wilderness they both cherished. Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, a forensic psychologist who specialized in analyzing behavior during survival situations, offered additional insights into the ring placement. Her analysis suggested that people facing life-threatening circumstances often engage in symbolic acts that help them maintain psychological control and leave meaningful traces for loved ones to discover. The deliberate placement of wedding rings in a protected location like a tree hollow suggests the individuals were thinking clearly and had time to make conscious decisions, Dr. Hawthorne explained to investigators. This behavior is consistent with people who recognize they may not survive, but want to ensure their story can eventually be told. Others theorized the ring placement might have been motivated by more practical concerns. If the couple had found themselves in a survival situation, they might have hidden valuable items to prevent their loss while attempting to find help or navigate difficult terrain. A more somber possibility was that the couple, facing some kind of life-threatening situation, had chosen to preserve their wedding rings as a way to ensure their love story would eventually be discovered, even if they themselves could not survive whatever challenges they were facing. The expanded investigation, energized by the ring discovery, continued for several more months. Additional search teams explored areas that had never been thoroughly examined during the original search efforts, using improved techniques and equipment that had not been available in 1993. In early 2013, this renewed search effort yielded what investigators believed would be the final pieces of the puzzle. In a steep ravine approximately half a mile from the tree where the rings were found, searchers discovered more substantial human remains along with additional personal items definitively linked to the missing couple. The remains were found in a location that would have been extremely difficult to reach accidentally. The ravine was hidden from view and required careful navigation to access safely. This discovery suggested that Sarah and Daniel had been exploring areas well beyond any established trails when whatever happened to them occurred. Among the personal items recovered were Daniel's camera, still containing undeveloped film that would provide the final insights into their last day alive. The camera had been partially protected by its case, allowing some of the images to be successfully developed nearly 20 years after they were taken. The photographs revealed that Sarah and Daniel had indeed ventured far from their planned route, exploring remote areas of stunning natural beauty that few visitors to Glacier National Park ever see. The images showed them appearing happy and healthy, completely unaware that they were documenting their final hours together. The last photograph on the roll, apparently taken by Daniel using the camera's timer function, showed both Sarah and Daniel standing together near what investigators identified as the cedar tree where their rings would later be discovered. They were smiling and appeared to be enjoying their adventure, showing no signs of distress or concern. Forensic examination of the remains, combined with analysis of the recovered personal items and photographic evidence, allowed investigators to piece together a likely sequence of events during Sarah and Daniel's final day. The evidence suggested that the couple had deliberately left the main trail to explore more remote areas of the park, possibly attracted by wildlife sightings or scenic views that caught their attention. This decision, while not unusual for experienced hikers, had taken them into terrain that was more challenging and potentially dangerous than their planned route. At some point during their exploration, the couple had apparently suffered a hiking accident in the steep terrain near the ravine where their remains were ultimately discovered. The nature of their injuries, as determined by forensic examination, was consistent with a significant fall that would have made it impossible for them to return to safety. However, the evidence also indicated that at least one of them had survived the initial accident long enough to return to the area where they had been camping and to place their wedding rings in the hollow tree. This discovery suggested that their final hours had involved desperate attempts to signal for help or leave evidence of their fate for future discovery. The case was officially closed in late 2013, 20 years after Sarah and Daniel's disappearance. While many questions remained unanswered, investigators concluded that the couple had died as the result of a hiking accident in extremely remote terrain, and that their bodies had remained undiscovered for so long due to the challenging location and the vastness of the wilderness area. For the families, the discoveries provided both closure and continued heartbreak. After 2 decades of uncertainty, they finally knew what had happened to their children, but the knowledge came with the definitive confirmation that Sarah and Daniel had not survived their final adventure together. The Thompson and Morrison families chose to leave their children's remains in Glacier National Park, the place they had loved so much that they had chosen to spend their honeymoon exploring its wilderness. A small memorial was established near the Avalanche Lake trailhead, serving as a reminder of their story and a warning about the importance of staying on established trails. The case became a significant part of park safety education programs, illustrating how quickly experienced hikers can find themselves in life-threatening situations when they venture into unfamiliar terrain. Park rangers regularly reference Sarah and Daniel's story when advising visitors about wilderness safety and the importance of informing others about planned routes. The National Park Service incorporated lessons learned from the Thompson-Morrison case into their standard safety protocols. New regulations implemented in the mid-90s required hikers planning extended backcountry trips to file detailed itineraries and check in at regular intervals. These changes were directly influenced by the recognition that even experienced outdoors enthusiasts could disappear without trace in wilderness environments. The case also contributed to improvements in search and rescue training programs throughout the national park system. The challenges encountered during the 19-year investigation highlighted gaps in search protocols and led to development of new techniques for conducting long-term missing person investigations in wilderness settings. Training programs now emphasize the importance of expanding search areas beyond immediate vicinity of last known locations, recognizing that missing persons may travel much farther than initially expected. The discovery of evidence years later in locations far from the original search area became a key teaching example for search and rescue professionals. The discovery of the rings in the tree hollow became particularly significant for search and rescue professionals, who recognized it as an example of how missing persons sometimes leave evidence in unexpected locations. The case influenced search protocols and helped develop new strategies for looking beyond immediate areas when people disappear in wilderness settings. For the hiking community, Sarah and Daniel's story serves as a poignant reminder of both the beauty and the danger inherent in wilderness exploration. Their final photographs, showing them happy and in love in some of the most spectacular scenery in North America, capture the spirit of adventure that draws millions of people to places like Glacier National Park. The cedar tree where their rings were discovered has become an unofficial memorial site, visited by hikers who learn about their story and want to pay their respects. Park officials generally discourage visitors from seeking out the location, both for safety reasons and to preserve the dignity of the site, but the tree continues to serve as a symbol of enduring love and the mysteries that wilderness areas can hold. The case also highlights the evolution of search and rescue technology and techniques over the past several decades. The tools and methods available in 1993 were significantly less sophisticated than those used during the later phases of the investigation, and it's possible that earlier discovery of the remains might have been possible with contemporary equipment and techniques. Today, hikers visiting Glacier National Park carry GPS devices, satellite communicators, and other technology that makes wilderness travel significantly safer than it was in the early 1990s. However, the basic challenges of hiking in remote terrain remain the same, and Sarah and Daniel's story continues to serve as an important reminder about respecting the power and unpredictability of wilderness environments. The love story that began during a camping trip in Colorado and ended in the remote wilderness of Montana continues to resonate with people who hear about their case. Their decision to place their wedding rings in the tree hollow, whatever motivated it, created a lasting symbol of their commitment to each other that survived long after they were gone. In the end, Sarah Michelle Thompson and Daniel Ray Morrison found a kind of immortality in the wilderness they loved, their story becoming part of the enduring legacy of Glacier National Park, and a reminder that some mysteries take decades to solve, but love leaves traces that time cannot completely erase.